just everyday political procrastinating, because it's human nature to put off difficult decisions until tomorrow rather than deal with them today, but putting off difficult decisions with the absolute confidence that somewhere along the way, California will fix itself again. And if we just keep delaying our budgetary problems, our other public policy challenges into the future, if we keep rolling over debt and running up tens of billions of dollars worth of unacknowledged deficit, it's okay. Because sooner or later, Silicon Valley will invent something else really cool. And that will make us lots of money, and that will bring in lots of tax revenue, and that will solve the problem. So the good news is California is broken, and we do have the capacity to break ourselves fairly regularly. The good news is we show the capacity for fixing ourselves when necessary. But what concerns me, and I suspect what we'll talk about for the balance of the time today, is the reluctance, for understandable reasons, on the part of our elected and non-elected leadership to confront these problems, because ultimately nobody saves you for you, you save yourself. And while our elected leaders sit in Sacramento waiting for that next cool thing to come out of Silicon Valley and blow up our tax base again, problems get worse and the hole gets deeper. So there's hope, but there's certainly room for a lot of fear.
And what's the that's a quick one. I was struck during the recent, during the July budget negotiations. The state had a $23.5 billion budget hole to fill. And it seemed like those of us outside of Sacramento were living in a parallel universe, because all you heard from up there was education people saying can't touch education, transportation people can't touch transportation, ditto the prison people, ditto environmental people. There seemed to be, not just among the electeds, but among all of the pressure groups as well, a complete unreality to the straits that California is in. Is part of the difficulty, is all of the difficulty leadership, or is part of it that the cacophony of sort of support mechanisms that could build a compromise and build a solution is itself also not willing to deal with this?
Well, it's both. And I think you're right about the disconnect, and that's exactly the right way to phrase it, Kat, is we have a populace here in California that pays remarkably little attention to state government and state politics for perfectly understandable and often defensible reasons. But what that means is that the people left in charge of making these decisions really don't have to answer to anyone, because the voters who under other circumstances might be demanding accountability, as they do at the local level and as they do at the federal level, often don't ask for that, demand that accountability at the federal level. You've heard the old saying that politics is too important to be left to the politicians. Well, the slight addendum to that is politics is too important to be left to the politicians and the attendant interest groups who spend their time weaving magic on our political leaders. So what you're left with, the common term is boom and bust budgeting. When we're in an economic boom, whenever Silicon Valley or real estate or the entertainment industry or trade explodes and we have all the revenue we need and more, everybody spends. Everybody spends, and to borrow a cliche from an old friend of mine, spends in a way that gives drunken sailors a bad name. And Democrats increase spending and Republicans cut taxes. Not that Republicans are against increased spending, Democrats are against lower taxes, as long as it doesn't impact their core priorities. So we spend and we spend and we spend. Now, boom and bust budgeting, though, I'd suggest to you, would actually be a market improvement from the way we actually approach these budgetary challenges. Because a boom and bust budget, as those of you who live your lives like me know, means that when you're in a boom, when things are good, you may spend every penny you have. But when you're in a bust, when times are difficult, that means you stop spending. Or at least you stop spending as much. And if California state government actually had the self-restraint to engage in boom and bust budgeting, we might not be in a tremendous situation right now. But at least we would have stopped spending during those economic downturns and would be somewhere closer to a balanced budget. What we engage in, I referenced the term earlier, is what I call Wile E. Coyote budgeting. And for those of you who grew up watching Roadrunner cartoons, you remember that Wile E. Coyote, in chasing the Roadrunner, would periodically run off the cliff in pursuit of the Roadrunner. The Roadrunner would stop right short of the cliff. Wiley would run off the cliff, and he'd run and he'd run and he'd run in the air. And it would take a little while for him to realize that there was no cliff left beneath him. And he'd look down, and then only then, when he realized there was no ground beneath it, would he fall. And the Acme anvil would fall on him, and then the next cartoon would come on. That's sort of the way we budget. And that we spend during boom and bust periods as if there is always a boom. And over the last year or so, what you have seen is the governor and the legislative leadership getting far enough off the cliff to realize that there is no cliff beneath them anymore, falling to the ground and having the Acme anvil hit them. And the reason for that, and circling back to your question, is number one, a disconnect, knowing that it's always easier to appease a demanding interest than to confront them. But second, the lack of accountability from a public and civic leadership process that really doesn't demand it from our elected leaders at the state level.
There's been so much hue and cry over the last couple of weeks of people going to town halls and, advocating their positions, whether that be by holding Nazi signs or whatever. But there has been a lot of talk of sort of an outraged populace, an engaged populace, for better or worse. Do you see that coming into play here? That's part of your solution, but is it happening?
To be clear, Nazi signs are not part of my solution.
Didn't mean to suggest that.
But it is an odd situation, particularly after the special election last May. The punditocracy, if you will, at least the rest of it, asserted that California voters were angry at state government. And I don't think that's the case. We're seeing that anger, we're seeing that outrage at the federal level in both directions, expressed in a variety of different ways. I think Californians have pretty much given up on state government. We're angry about Washington, and whether you're angry at Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, or whether you're angry at Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, is a matter of ideological and partisan perspective. But we pay attention, we get motivated, we get mad. And at the state level, it's just not there. Now, to be fair, we proclaim appropriately the strength of our state's diversity. And our diversity is our strength. It's what's made California such a successful, such a tremendous place to live. And it's one of the reasons we've been able to fix ourselves so many times over the years when we've been broken. But diversity also means a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas. And I try to remind my friends back east when we talk about dysfunctional California, that 38 million people strewn from San Ysidro to Eureka, that's a lot of diversity. I said, what would happen if you asked the people of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Connecticut all to come together to solve common problems? Not that easy, because a much less homogeneous community is much less likely to come to agreement. And what that means, I suspect, and there's people in this room I think who are much better prepared to talk about this than I am, and I'll turn this into a conversation in a couple of minutes, is when you live in a society that's not only so diverse, but that's so large, in which so much of the rest of the populace is just an abstraction to you, you turn inward. And you begin to focus on community-based solutions rather than something as abstract as a 38 million people nation state.